When it comes to fantasy works, be it movies, books or games, dwarves are a common race in it. And whenever I watch a movie or play a game where dwarves are in, I always enjoy seeing their over-the-top large underground cities and cool looking architecture. Not only that, but I also find it very interesting to think about how a city completely underground would work and how managing one would be. And I think the developer, Warpzone Studios, was thinking along the same lines when creating Hammerting. In Hammerting, you manage a Dwarven mining colony in the unexplored mountains of Mara. As a war rages in the overworld, you need to craft, explore and fight as you provide your allies with the finest weapons and gear to assist them in the war against evil. Hammerting sounds like a dream come true for me. Instead of thinking how it would be to create a Dwarven city underground, I get to build and manage one myself. However, Hammerting was released in early access on the 27th of October 2020. In other words, the game is not done yet. However, judging by the Steam page, it looks very solid. It might not fulfill my wish completely right now, but I'm willing to give it a shot and see if this can turn into a game that will. Now, before we dig in, a quick disclaimer. This is an unfinished game in early access. However, in my opinion, being in early access does not protect you from criticism or opinions. Though it would be unfair to fully review this game as I usually do. Instead, consider this my first impression on Hammerting and my critique and feedback about the current state of the game. I know it seems a bit unnecessary to say, but I just wanted to make sure that it was clear. And so now it is, let's dive into Hammerting. Hammerting didn't start off in the best way for me. Before diving into the game, I tried to change its resolution and set it to window mode, which turned out to be a problem. First of all, there is no dedicated resolution setting, and changing from full screen to window mode didn't seem to work. After a couple of times changing the setting and rebooting the game constantly, I finally got it to work. However, the resolution was still something I had to change every single time I booted up the game. On the main menu there is a tab where improvements for the game are promised, and quality of life is one of them, and I highly recommend putting the settings issue on that list. After that one annoying hurdle and a simple tutorial, I was ready to build my own mining colony. Though in hindsight, maybe the tutorial was a bit too simple. It explains everything in the UI, but not with a lot of context. Now, not everything needs to be explained till its finest details. I really like it when management games gives you the option to explore everything yourself instead of bombing you with endless tutorials. However, the tutorial did not mention in any form or way how to set up the basic things for your base, or how to obtain certain resources like gold, or how to take care of your dwarf's needs. These things are discussed, however, in the Book of Things, which basically is the wiki page in the game itself. However, it's a lot to go through, and even there, information can be unsatisfying. But again, I don't mind figuring stuff out in a game like this, and I don't mind to restart a couple of times as I learn the game through trial and error. But there are also people who don't like this process, and for them it would be good to have the option to get the basics explained. This could be done through the text in the already existing tutorial, or even a dedicated game mode where you learn the ropes step by step. Once you have an understanding of the basics, the game opens up completely. At the beginning you are actively involved with your colony, as there's always something to do or problems to solve. Your workforce is also limited, so you have to find a balance in things you want to focus on. Do you focus on research and exploration, or focus heavily on development and the needs of your workers? The choices themselves might not be that hard, but there are a lot of them and they have a big impact early on. However, as time progresses and your colony develops, the choices you make and the impact they have fades away quickly. When your colony has a good foundation, it can basically run itself and all future problems are alienated. At that point, the only thing you need to do is to check the numbers from time to time. Is the food production where it needs to be? Are there enough beds? And is everyone overall happy? This is, of course, the direction you want to go in a management game like this. It's about progressing through the tiers, setting up newer and better processes while perfecting, improving and automating the older ones. In games like this, progression and the feeling of it is key. Yet, in Hammerting, progression exposes a lot of this game's issues. The biggest one is definitely the inconsistency and the lack of noticeable progression. In early game, this progression is very noticeable as you rapidly improve and expand your colony. But once you leave the early game, you can almost feel a noticeable handbrake being pulled on your experience. Suddenly you go from actively involvement to almost completely passive involvement with your colony. The colony can run itself without any problem at this point, and all you do is checking the numbers and expand your colony without any actual goal or meaning. The research tree, where you unlock new technology that should keep you involved with the colony, is very basic. And while some improvements are great, like automated miners or elevators, it has barely any impact. And as your mining colony expands, logistics starts to become a problem as well. Traveling through the mine becomes a huge inconvenience, and it's one of those elements that you expect to be able to solve in a game like this. While it technically offers you some form of solution in forms of elevators and minecarts, it doesn't improve the situation nor completely solve the issue. Mid-game right now exists mostly of building scaffolding and routes for your dwarves so that they can dig an endless amount of tunnels to explore the mountain further, which is another element that seriously lacks impact. The game heavily encourages you to explore the mountain by rewarding you lore points, which play a huge role in unlocking research. However, it's also the only real reason to explore the mountain. There's not a lot of interesting things to find underground besides from more resources or infested areas of rats or mushroom people, which you of course completely wipe out. During this time, I really felt disappointed in how little I was doing for my colony. There are improvements and upgrades I could do, but then again, they are almost unnoticeable. Things like better food options and materials to craft better tools are great, but barely make a difference as there's no need for them. There is a morale system in this game which could be used perfectly to solve this problem and boost your involvement as the player, but right now the game just doesn't use that system at all. Dwarves lose morale when they don't have a place to sleep or don't have anything to eat. They of course recover that with drinking beer, but that's it. That's the morale system right now. What this system really needs is more depth, where dwarves' morale is more affected by good and bad things, which in turn would affect the colony in positive and of course negative ways. As you progress through the game and unlock new improvements and upgrades, dwarves should start demanding them, and if you don't fulfill their needs, it would have bad effects on your colony, which you of course want to avoid, thereby making you more involved with the game and the management aspect of it. What the game did really well is keeping the way you build things very simple. The freedom and the way of building and organizing your colony reminds me of the game Oxygen Not Included, while housing and work locations are done in rooms, which reminded me a bit of Fallout shelters. I really like the idea of the rooms as it keeps the game to a degree simple in design, but they also really look cool. They all have the almost typical dwarf architecture, which does a great job in creating a good soothing atmosphere. It's a shame that the decoration department is really lacking right now, but according to the menu they are working on that as well. Though when it comes to building, the AI is kinda stupid. Countless of times dwarves got stuck as they demolished the wrong scaffolding first, or mined or built themselves stuck on a wall. Especially when digging out large areas, it felt like I had to babysit the workers because they somehow always got themselves stuck. But the worst of all is sometimes these events happen in a chain. First they mine in such a way that they get stuck while leaving a spot they could have mined but can't anymore. Which means you now have to place scaffolding so they can reach it again, but this results in having to babysit them when removing these scaffoldings, because if you don't, a dwarf gets stuck in mid-air on one of these scaffoldings. At first I could laugh about this, but after a couple of times it really got under my skin. Hammerting's Steam's description mentions a war raging in the overworld and that your colony needs to craft, explore and fight to provide for your allies. It's probably right now the most disappointing system in the game. The idea behind it gives your colony a goal and purpose, and I really like that idea, but it's very basic and clumsy right now. As the war rages on, your allies will start requesting resources and weapons. Some requests have a time limit while others are repeatable. The repeatable requests are usually resources that you have an abundance of, and the rewards are usually resources that you can't get underground. Think like hides or wood. The time limited requests are usually critical moments where a location on the overworld is attacked. If it gets taken by the enemy, you can't get certain resources anymore from your allies, as that specific request that rewards those resources was bound to that location. And as you can imagine, some of those resources are important to you, as you can't get them by your own means. And again, I really like this idea, as it means you need to keep your production on point and effective. If the position is lost on the overworld, it should have effect on your colony. And you can sorta guess where I'm going right now, as here it doesn't really have that. There was never a defeat that would even remotely cripple my colony or had any effect at all. There was only one position that I could not afford to lose, which was the one that provided me wood. The rest were all pretty expandable. However, there is an even bigger issue here, which is that accepting and completing these requests is just annoying. You constantly have to accept and complete these requests manually, which is annoying busy work to do. Why do I constantly have to complete these quests myself? When I fill the quota, let them just autocomplete. What makes the difference that I press complete on them? It would also be a big improvement if these repeatable requests would not only change over time, but also start to demand more resources so you can't mindlessly grind them. And lastly, something that personally really annoyed me was that on the Steam page this game has the tag lore rich, which is just false. So far there has been no real story to speak of other than the opening lines that you see every time you start a new game. And while the overworld looks cool and the locations have flavor tags, it's not something I consider lore rich. Especially looking at the premise of the game, I actually got really disappointed by the lack of world building and the role my mining colony played in the world itself. When I hear a war rages in the overworld and that your colony needs to craft, explore and fight to provide for your allies, I thought to a degree I could choose who my allies were, or that the game at least had some kind of diplomacy system. But the truth is that your allies are just as faceless as the enemy faction marked as evil. I don't even know why there was a war in the first place, and even if I knew, the way I influenced that war is just too basic. I would like to see a bit more of a diplomacy system in this game where I could create trading deals or have reputation with different factions. I mean, the dwarfs you hire come from different factions, so why not have that play a bigger role here? It would make things even more interesting if both warring sides try to pursue you to join them and you getting an actual choice in it. Of course, if you join one of the two sides, this would mean attacks or raids on your colony and supply lines. You would need to get protection from your allies, which could be in the form of guards or even a stronghold in your colony. Maybe add some traps and fortifications yourself, which would add another layer of management and building strategy to the game. Maybe the latter one would be a bit too far, but having more choice to make about the overworld war and it having an increased effect on your colony would definitely make things more interesting. In the end, Hammerting is so far pretty decent, but there is enough room for improvement, which of course is to be expected from a game in early access. The first time figuring everything out was a lot of fun, and even starting a new game from time to time is also a joy because the early game is very solid. However, ironically, this mine colony game lacks depth in many different departments. Especially exploring and progression lags behind after a couple of hours. Despite that, the way you manage the workload and the simplistic way of building is great and would even become better with an AI update and decorations. I would welcome a way where we, the players, would get a bigger role in the overworld war. Be it with updated requests or even some form of politics system. Either way, it really needs some work, as right now it's just annoying. More lore and a story would be nice here, but for me it's not a must. I prefer having the gameplay as the main focus in management games. Right now, Hammerting's price tag is 25 euros on Steam, which I would consider to be rather high. However, if you're like me and just love the idea of building your own underground Dwarven mine, then you will get your money's worth, especially speaking in the long term. If you are interested in Hammerting, but you're not sure about the price or the amount of content that it offers right now, I would recommend putting this game on your wishlist and wait till the game is on sale or when further updates are released.